everyone. Welcome to the Mindful Place Summit. Today we have Michael Bready, M.A.M.A.P.P., and he's the founder and director of Youth Mindfulness, a UK-based charity dedicated to developing and delivering transformative mindful-based well-being programs for children and young people. Michael has taught mindfulness to thousands of children, teenagers, and young adults, and has trained hundreds of educators to become mindfulness teachers. He is the author of the international renowned Youth Mindfulness Kids program and Youth Mindfulness Soma program, and led the development and delivery of the first positively evaluated mindfulness program for young men in prisons in Scotland in collaboration with the University of Glasgow. Wow. He holds a master's in applied positive psychology for the University of Pennsylvania. Currently, Michael is especially interested in the emergence of new stories based in science of what it means to be human and how this transformation of understanding can lead to changes in culture and society. Wow, welcome, Michael. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me, Crystal. Yeah, it's really nice to be with you. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'm just really curious to know about your approach with sharing mindfulness with young children and with young people.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that you realize straight away when you start working with young people, or one of the differences in terms of sharing mindfulness with young people as opposed to sharing mindfulness with adults, is when adults come to learn mindfulness, they already have an intention. They have a reason why they want to learn mindfulness. Maybe they want to sleep better, they want to stress less. Chances are they might have just paid money for a course. So they're all kind of already bought in. They've got a motivation. But when you come to share mindfulness with young people, chances are most of the time, they don't even know what mindfulness is when you're starting out. And even if they do, their motivation is probably very low. Like, why would they want to learn this? They'd rather be running around outside, playing games, doing whatever, So I think the key way into sharing mindfulness with young people is to ignite their motivation, is to ignite their enthusiasm, their interest in it, their curiosity. And so that's really, I think, at the heart of it. If you've got that, if they want to learn mindfulness, like, you're already 50% of the way there. So, and I guess in our kind of work, there's a few different ways into that with the wee ones, with the kind of like 7, 8, 9-year-olds. There's probably 3 pathways that we take towards that kind of engagement. So one is to make things really interesting. So to kind of pique the curiosity, they kind of, my experience of going in and sharing mindfulness with young ones like 9 years, 10 years old, is that their eyes are really bright. When you start to talk about the brain, or you start to talk about something like gratitude and how it can really have a massive impact in your life, these kind of ideas, they can be really caught by them. They can be really curious, really interested. So that's one way. And the other way that we found is by inspiring, by making things really inspirational. And so in our programs, we try to bring ideas of mindfulness to life, like different concepts, whether it's the quality of emotional regulation, like allowing experience, or maybe it's the theme of kindness, or maybe it's the theme of self-discipline, right? We try to bring these concepts to life, not just in a dry kind of talking about them, but actually bring them to life maybe through video or through some activity. And it's often a lot of the videos that we use in our programs tend to be very inspiring. So that kind of draws the young ones towards these practices and these ideas. And then the other thing, especially with the young ones, but it's also true with the teenagers, is just by making it fun. If they have fun in the sessions, if they have a laugh, if there's games, there's activities, what they start to do is they start to see these sessions as a fun thing. So when it's mindfulness time again, they're like, oh, what are we going to do today? This will be interesting. This will be fun. And so all of these things kind of build towards engagement. And the other thing that's kind of another big plank of our work in terms of working with teenagers, which is a little bit different, is, or maybe it's just a more, I think it's a more importance with teenagers, is relationship, is building the relationship between facilitating the young people, but also among the young people. So if there's a kind of a positive relational vibe amongst the group, then kind of discussions around mindfulness practice, it all flows really easily. But if there's not a positive relational vibe, if the young people don't feel relationally connected, what tends to happen for teenagers is they'll feel unsafe, they'll feel judged. And when they've had their barriers up, there's no way you're going to
They
get
shut
mindfulness
down.
going. So those are the kind of yeah, and there's lots of different ways you can bring the various aspects of mindfulness to life. But I think at the heart, you've got to have the kind of foundation of it, and that is the intention and motivation. And with teenagers, because I think they feel quite judged a lot, you've got to get the foundation of safeness there, and then you've got a good foundation for developing their understanding of mindfulness.
Absolutely. That connection piece is huge, right? Where they
Mm.
they feel safe. They don't feel like they have to shut down. And if that connection piece is missing and trying to learn something new, children, adults of all ages, it's like there's that block there. Now, I'm curious to know about, when we use the word paradigm, right? It's like, you
Mm.
know, if you think that this represents a new paradigm in education, what do you kind of mean by this? Because I know you've mentioned it in some of your chats prior.
Yeah. So what I yeah, paradigm is kind of it's kind of an overused word, and you would get the sense that new paradigms are happening every kind of 6 months or something, But what I mean by that is, I think it's a real shift in our a real shift is happening in our understanding of what it means to be human. So way back to, and I think there's a new story emerging, but it's also a very ancient story. So back to the time of the Enlightenment, there's this kind of separation that happens between brain and body, and also this separation that happens between the kind of heart and mind. So it's interesting in Eastern languages, like in Sanskrit, they have the word for mind there is chitta, which means kind of one's whole being, one's heart, mind, soma, all really in one, Whereas in the West, our word for mind really relates to just the brain. It doesn't really, we kind of cut off the body and we kind of cut off emotions to some degree, So our education system, I think, is principally been focused on training these kind of academic qualities and cognitive qualities, cognitive capacities, so reading, writing, traditional academics. And that's been what's been given greatest privilege for a good few 100 years, I would say. But I think we're at a point where, and what's been lost is any exploration of how we cultivate wisdom, how do we cultivate character, how do we cultivate these qualities of the heart, how do we cultivate compassion, perspective, connectedness, social intelligence. These are really and increasingly recognized as actually fundamental to living a flourishing life. Like you can have a IQ off the charts, but if you don't have any self-discipline, like that's never really going to translate into any accomplishments. Angela Duckworth, who's a professor at University of Pennsylvania, has done a lot of work on the theory of grit, and some of her research shows that actual grit, that determination to long-term goals, is more predictive of academic success than IQ. So it's these kind of qualities of character that I think are actually more fundamentally more important. Not that we want to throw out the academic stuff, but there's a shift to recognizing the importance of that, the kind of whole human being. And I think we used to have this, in the traditions of the past, and all of the world's wisdom traditions. There were practices, forms of education, initiations that would have supported young people making that transition to mature, wise human beings. But we've kind of lost touch with that, and so I think that shift is happening in education. But I think also it's paralleled by a real deep exploration of what it means to be human and what's possible for human beings. So in terms of, just looking at the research in contemplative neuroscience, in research in interpersonal neurobiology, looking at what happens when we engage in a kind act or we receive kindness, or when we feel attuned to others, and how our levels of oxytocin start to sync up together. So we're starting to learn at a very deep level how the body and mind respond to these qualities of being if these are cultivated. And I think this is really exciting. This is 50 years ago this would have been complete woo. Meditation, mindfulness, complete. It was totally a kind of pariah field. Nobody was interested. And now the science is really showing the power of this stuff.
It's wonderful. When you
Yeah.
speak, of course, I'm smiling because it's so inspirational. At first, I think back of my upbringing, and you're right, it's the woo, right? And understanding that, for me, sharing my age at 36, if I could have had these foundational skills at such a young age, and I'm so grateful that I'm, moving through and implementing, in my 30s, but could you imagine having those foundational skills as a child to move through? And maybe some of our listeners definitely have, had those skills growing up. But for somebody like myself, understanding that, I wasn't deeply breathing. I wasn't using, my full body to actually have that connection, to own my own energy. And as an adult, it was like I had this innate understanding that these pieces were important inside of me, but relearning like to ride a bike again. And to hear you speak just brings so much spark inside of me, because knowing the shift that's happening, the work that's happening, across the globe, and to create that movement, that momentum, and to see some of the, mindful practices coming in with awareness in the school district here in Canada, it's like, okay, we're seeing some stuff, slowly, but you're right. It comes even earlier, and it comes into this innate understanding that that's inside of us, and to be able to tap into that, and the imagination and the creativity and that trust in self, right? Just really, really beautifully put, how you're explaining it. So I really, really appreciate that. So tell me more about your youth mindfulness programs. That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, so we have a number of different programs that we've developed over the years. I can say maybe our kind of couple of main ones. I could talk a little bit about our kids program. So our kids program is a program that I started developing about eight years ago, maybe. So it's ideal for kind of 7 to 11-year-olds, and it's 16 lessons long, and each lesson is 1 hour. And what it really seeks to do is it seeks to be a really deep introduction to mindfulness and related practices. So the program starts with the first 6 lessons are really about grounding in the fundamentals of mindfulness practice. So lesson 1 is all about intention, all about motivation. So that's where we start, because why, if the kids are going to practice this, they have to have a motivation to do that, so they have to have a rationale, and they have to be their curiosity peak. So we explore things like neuroplasticity, we explore the brain, we explore what mindfulness is, and we give them some kind of we kind of tempt them into like, why might this be interesting to explore, And then as we go through lessons kind of 2 and 3, we start to explore this idea of present moment attention, and exploring things like, the wandering mind, the dynamics of attention. What is attention? Because attention for us as adults is, it's a concept that we understand, but for kids, it's something quite new, And actually, that's where a lot of the joy can really come from the program, because I've actually found in sharing mindfulness with kids, they can be a teacher to me as much as I'm a teacher to them, because they're discovering this stuff really for the first time in a very fresh way, and they're exploring how they can direct their attention. Like, for instance, if they look at the ceiling, and the ceiling's a particular color, then they're learning that where we place attention determines what experience is, and then they close their eyes, and then they pay attention to sounds, and now they're no longer experiencing a sight or a color. Now they're experiencing sounds. And so we start to play with this exploration of experience, which would be really, really enjoyable. And then as we move into lessons 4, 5, and 6, we start to explore the attitudinal qualities of mindfulness. So these are qualities like allowing, curiosity, kindness to self-discipline, So all of these qualities are really important in not just paying attention to the present moment, but how we pay attention. I remember one wee boy saying to me, See if you're looking at somebody and you're angry at them and you're shouting in their face, that's mindfulness, isn't it? Because you're paying attention to them, paying attention to the present moment. And I said, nice try, wee man. But no, of course, it's not mindfulness, because in order for it to be mindfulness, we have to pay attention with a certain attitude. And that attitude is one of kind of openness, allowing, gentleness, curiosity, So that's what we look at. And then that kind of forms the foundation. Really, those first 6 lessons are all about cultivating embodied, present moment, non-judgmental awareness. That's what the whole first 6 lessons come about. And we explore this in different ways. And then that really enables the kids to kind of touch into the being mode. So they can actually rest in embodied awareness, connected to the experience of the breath, without being reactive to whatever impulse or itch or distraction comes up. But they can start to maintain some continuity of connection with the present moment. And then from that, that becomes the foundation for exploring different themes. So lessons 7 and 8, we look at how being mindful, being present can help us be in touch with the good stuff in life, the stuff that's nourishing, the stuff that we can appreciate, so that can build our gratitude. It can help us be wisely in touch with the difficult stuff, so it can help us take care of difficult emotions, difficult thoughts. And then it can also be a pathway into kindness. So kindness to our own self, but then kindness to others. So that becomes the kind of focus of lessons 11 to 14, the cultivation of kindness. And then the last couple of lessons, we start to touch into kind of questions of agency. Like, okay, you've learned all this stuff. How do you want to be now as a person? Like, how do you want to live in the world? And so that's kind of what we kind of explore in the last couple of lessons. And so when I was developing the kids program, I really wanted to make it a kind of a holistic program, and to have some depth to it. I didn't want it to be like just a way for kids to concentrate a little bit better or reduce anxiety a little bit before exams, much as they are worthwhile endeavors. I wanted it to be really to take the best knowledge in positive psychology and mindfulness and related practices and fashion something that could really support the kids' well-being. And so that's kind of we've now trained like about 700 educators in that program, and in about more than 25 different countries. And so it's going really well. And I think I mentioned to you, Krista, we have another course starting in online training, and starting October 1st. And that's a kids program. And then our Soma program kind of intends to like explore similar themes. But what we found with the Soma program is we actually need to take a radically different approach. Because the kids program is quite kind of set and standard, and we found that you go in a classroom with 30 kids and it'll just work again and again and again. But with the Soma program, this was for kind of 12 to 21 year olds, and what we found was that the diversity of need and disposition in teenagers was much greater than in the young ones. Like 13-year-old boys kind of at risk of dropping out of school, maybe, vandalizing things at lunchtime and all that kind of stuff, are very different to like 17-year-old kids that are anxious before exams, but, thinking about university. So the kind of approach you need for these different groups we found is very different. So rather than having a kind of a standardized set of lessons in the Soma program, we developed this modular, flexible approach. So you can kind of pick up activities and drop them into sessions so that they meet the needs of the young people you're working with. So that was really, and the other important thing we found with the Soma program is this idea of putting relationship before content. So like, rather than thinking about, right, I need to get through this learning outcome and I need to get through this and this and this, like the most important thing in sharing mindfulness with young people, with teenagers and young adults, is the relationship. If there's this positive relationship between yourself and the young people and among the young people, the learning kind of flows from there. So we always try to prioritize that before trying to get to any important conceptual learning outcome. Or yeah.
Well, I'm really inspired by that. And, looking at my oldest, she is 10, and she's just starting to understand, more of her own mindful practices of being, open-minded, and just recently, actually, we've been getting her to do some more, she has anxiety, so getting to do some more guided meditations and stuff before sleep to help her calm her sleep. But what I've noticed is she's more aware of her thoughts. And as we move through these experiences together, she's understanding that her thoughts cause her reactions, which cause her reaction. So starting with that thought with her and having her just land with the thought of that
Mm.
starting point,
Mm.
and sharing that, she can control those thoughts and she can choose to think one way or she can choose to think the other way. And the transformation in a few short weeks of just expanding on that awareness with her. And my expertise is like the 0 to 5, 0 to 6. So to
Mm.
look at some of these resources that you provide, I'm very, very interested and intrigued. And the early learning for me, it seems like it can move and flow, but as soon as they hit that 6, 7, 8 to adolescence, I kind of, as a parent, go, okay, so understanding that there's some beautiful resources that I'm definitely going to look into for her, because
Mm.
I can only take her thus far, where it's almost like she can discover certain things better from an educator or a teacher that's not mom, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Right? Like
Yeah,
openness.
I know, I know. I think that shift can start to happen once kids get to that kind of, yeah, 8, 9, 10 age group,
Yeah.
and then upwards,
It's like
and
where
they start.
where does she fit? But she's really open and teachable. So hearing you talk about this just gets me really fired up on a personal level, and I'm sure our
Yeah.
listeners listening feel the same way too. I'm curious to know about why do you think it's important to be trauma sensitive in this work, and how can we become trauma sensitive?
Yeah, so I think one of the things about the kind of research on trauma, there's some studies looking at adverse childhood experiences. So these are termed ACEs, okay, adverse childhood experiences. And there's some major studies that kind of categorize these different experiences of adversity into 10 different types of events that can happen in childhood. And they kind of fall into 3 main categories: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. Um, and the studies generally show that by the time we reach 18, we'll have experienced 50% of us will experience one of these adverse events. And depending on the community, it might be as many as 14% will experience 4 or more. Now, once you start to get up to 3 or 4 of these adverse childhood experiences, the statistics show that there can be a lot of kind of mal effects on the young person's ability to learn, on relationships later in life, and physical health, and these kind of things. And so there's also a lot of research looking at how these experiences of adversity lead to chronic stress, the kind of activation of the stress system. And I'm kind of using adversity and trauma kind of interchangeably. These are terms that cover so many different areas, or so many different types of event, and you can have kind of one-off traumatic events, or you can have a childhood that might be have lots of very minor traumatic events, or you can have complex PTSD. So the reason I think it's important to be trauma sensitive is because, for one thing, this is not like a super rare thing. It's not like this is it's like, oh, if you're a mindfulness educator, you'll see like one kid in like 300 that's affected by trauma. No, it's like, if you're in a class of 30, chances are like a quarter of the kids there, depending on their age, will have experienced at least one type of adversity, and as the kids get older, they experience more adverse events, and some of the implications of this is kind of twofold. One is that that the practice of mindfulness could itself actually be re-traumatizing to a young person if they've experienced some kind of quite significant trauma, significant adversity. So trauma is often held in the body. So bringing awareness into the body, as we do in mindfulness practice, could cause a reaction. So in terms of being safe, it's good to be kind of clued up on the research around trauma and looking at some of the best practices around how we can share mindfulness in a trauma sensitive way, but also in order to make mindfulness kind of accessible to young people that have experienced trauma, an awareness and understanding of it is really helpful to that, So I would say that the first kind of step to becoming trauma sensitive is becoming informed about trauma, to really get clued up and educated on it. So, I mean, some thinkers and people that have really been helpful to me, people like Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote a book called Body Keeps Its Score. Peter Levine is a wonderful trauma practitioner. A guy called David Treleaven has a new book out, or fairly recently, called Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness, which is a really worthwhile read. I think it's Judith Herman as well as another great practitioner. So I think kind of, if we're doing this work, we want to be able to make this safe for people, and we want to be able to make this accessible to people. We don't want to be exclusionary with it. So yeah, I think developing knowledge around it. And in terms of one of the ways that we found important into being kind of trauma sensitive, or making the course, our programs kind of accessible to young people affected by trauma, and we found this really important in our SOMA program, was again focusing on the relationship. Because one of the things that the key to kind of resourcing people, and if they have experienced trauma, is through positive relationship. It's through positive relationship, feeling connected, that we feel safe. And if we feel safe, then we're more likely going to be in a physiological state that we can engage in a mindfulness practice more effectively, So that's another reason why we feel that building relationship is so vital in working with teenagers and young adults. Because through that, if they're in a positive relational kind of vibe to the group, they feel more safe. That kind of down regulates the stress system, and it again creates a foundation for them to engage in practice. Whereas if they've experiences of adversity and trauma, their stress system's always kind of up, so they're just not going to engage, or any engagement might be quite problematic. This is something I found a lot with the young guys I work with in the prison, because every single one of them experienced tons of trauma, tons of adversity. And it often would take like the third or fourth session before they start engaging in the mindfulness practice, because they just don't feel safe enough to connect with it, to go out there,
Yeah, absolutely. And, of all ages, children,
Yeah.
teens, adolescents, adults, that feeling safe is definitely key. Where do you think this entire field of education is headed?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a big question. I mean, my fear would be that it goes in the direction of kind of a tick box kind of thing, that it's like mindfulness becomes just another tool that people pick up, and we do a wee bit of mindfulness each day, for like 5 minutes at the start of the day, and that's the end of it. And there's not this deeper exploration of the potential of this, I mean, I think just within the traditions that mindfulness came from, these are like rich, deep traditions that really explored these questions of, okay, what does it mean to be human, and what is the potential for human beings? And these traditions came up with profound answers about our capacity to live with freedom, to live with tremendous compassion, tremendous courage, So in the past, human beings have explored these questions and came up with incredible answers to them, and incredible practices and ways of cultivating communities that support the flourishing of human beings. So I think what I would hope for over the next decades, and I think this is kind of decades long endeavor, is that the scientific fields are really in touch with the practice fields, and also that the wider culture can start to engage with these new understandings that are emerging about about human well-being and human flourishing. Because education, I think education both informs wider society and culture, but is also informed by it. They kind of, you know, we often, a lot of people get into education because they want to make a change in the world, and they think if we can nurture good stuff in kids, then they'll grow up and they'll have a more beautiful world. But also the nature of the society influences education. So, and society right now is kind of a little bit scary. We're in a tough place, you know. So I think yeah, that would be my hope, that we can take a kind of a positive turning into in culture and really not cut ourselves off from the depth of what's possible, I think. And mindfulness programs and practices, but also other related fields, you know. Yeah.
No, I really, really, really agree wholeheartedly that there's a shift happening, right? And it takes time. But the fact that there are such beautiful, beautiful creations happening around the world, and how do we become more aligned with each other, right? And in that alliance where we can support and we can share and we can inspire each other to support that. So I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I just want to share such gratitude for you, you know, carving out some time in your day to speak with me from across the world. And
Yes.
Is there any one last topic, you know, or statement that you want to leave our listeners with today before we wrap up our call?
Yeah, that's a good question. One last statement. I don't know. I would just the only thing that comes to mind is just to kind of make it. I kind of want to be a cheerleader for hope, which sounds a bit corny, but like whatever hope. I don't know. Whoever's listened to this, if you listen to this and you have hope in you, like hold on to that. That is like, I think, and whatever step you can take that is in service of that hope, whatever it might be. A little act of kindness, taking that 10 minutes to sit and practice for yourself in a day, writing down 3 things you're grateful for. All of these things, if we see the whole of like human society, this whole world is like a big ocean, you know. Every time we take a step in that direction of following what we kind of I don't know, what a deep knowing knows is what is going to be helpful to us and those around us in the world. Like we're putting another positive droplet in that ocean, you know? So yeah, I would say keep on keeping on.
Beautifully. Hold the hope. We've got you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much,
Yeah.
Michael. I really appreciate you and all your knowledge and support. And we'll touch base soon.
Cool. Thanks, Crystal.